It's really thinking about it. Hi. Hi YouTube. Back and running. I'm sorry. You may have, I don't know if you're gonna be able to find this stream, but hopefully you are. I don't know what happened there. It just cut off. I don't know where it cut off for you guys. So what I'm gonna do is, once I'm done the stream tonight, I will also upload. I'll upload the Twitch stream to the YouTube channel so that you can watch the video, and hopefully that'll have good video or audio on it, because sometimes it's a little bit off. I'm sorry. It's a night and a half. Okay. Hem. Wow. I don't even remember reading part of this. Okay. Let's go back, shall we? Hem. I'm sorry, Lord, but the local vintners have had a bad year. Where once we've got very good wine, now what we get is barely better than vinegar. In my mind, I was translating this as, I pay as little as I can manage for the wine, so I can't get any better. The beds were fairly comfortable, though. Next morning, Callie and I set out for our walk. When we were well out of sight of the inn, Callie said, "Turn your back while I change, Sherry." I turned my back while she slipped out of her dress and into a shirt and pair of trousers. We'd be going through the woods, along game trails, and scrambling over dead falls in a full skirt is to put one's self into too many disadvantages. For a good long time, traveling back roads and game trails and occasionally striking overland, we met nobody and nobody saw us. The route was longer, the way we had traveled, and to make up for that as much as possible, we got up early in the morning and traveled until late in the evening. Even at that, when the night falls in the deep woods, it is dark, so it was just not possible to travel very late. We therefore made as much use of the daylight as we could. One morning, Kayla stopped me. "We're getting very near, Jerry. I can feel the wards, faintly if I try." "What do you suggest? Would you like to try and hide us from them?" "It would be possible, for a while, but we'll have to assume that the prince has very competent magicians working for him. Sooner or later, most likely sooner, they'll notice that someone's trying to hide from them. If we go on as we are, we'll eventually send out patrols to look. They'll eventually send out patrols to look for us, but the patrols will have to find us first." "Pleased to hear you so confident in our abilities." She smiled. "I don't want to be using too much magic and drawing attention to the fact that there's a powerful magician trying to come up on them unawares. But that doesn't mean I can use no magic whatsoever. I have a couple of notions for the right time and place." I smiled back. "If you could just magic up a notion of how many soldiers the prince has guarding his approaches and where they are, I'd be very happy." Scrying. I think it falls into in the category of magic that's likely to draw their attention. Sorry. The next day, I noticed a brown wood sparrow sitting on a willow branch near our camp. He seemed very unafraid, even when we moved around. "See the sparrow there, Callie?" "Yes, I've got a light control spell on it. I can't force it to do anything I might want, but I can urge it to go in certain directions and then come back and let me know what it sees." "An ensorcelled sparrow? Won't that stand out?" "Not if I don't press it too hard. And I can't use the same bird more than a day at a time. Why not? She looked at me as if the answer were obvious. I'm interfering with its feeding. Certainly it feeds a little here and there as it carries out my directions, but not enough. And a small bird like that can't go too long being underfed. Makes sense. The bird didn't cause the trouble. Why should it suffer unduly on our account? Okay. With the help of the sparrow and various other birds from time to time, we made our way through woods, over hills, and down valleys, apparently unnoticed. 3 times the watchbirds brought us news of guards and patrols and sufficient time for us to work our way around them. We left very little trail for them to follow. I'd had training in that, and Callie was an apt pupil. However, if they really knew there was someone out there to track and got themselves on a skilled huntsman, he'd probably find traces of us. At the moment, though, we seemed safe from that. It couldn't last. My general reckoning was that we still had 5 days' travel or so to get to Walcheren. That was making allowances for the fact it wasn't a straight trail. I suddenly heard the sound of someone on the trail, but way some way behind us. I scarcely needed an aspect of the dance to tell me that the pursuit was on. It might have been some regular patrol, but I didn't heed any of old Horton's cautions against believing that. Worse, we were in loose, sparse brush, and though Callie had been an apt pupil in moving without tracks, there was scarcely time to teach her how to disappear in poor cover. About 100 yards up the trail, sparse, sparse brush began to shade into heavy brush, and eventually forest. If we could get to the forest, we might be able to disappear into places where the horses couldn't follow. All this required an instant's thought. Run for the trees! Callie didn't hesitate, just started running. I brought up the rear, not quite stepping on her heels. A man can outrun a horse over a long distance, but in a sprint, a horse can run down a man. When they saw us, of course, the riders urged their horses on. We would never reach the trees. When they saw us, it was no longer feasible to outrun them to the forest with enough time to hide as well. So I ran, trying to get as far as I could before they were too close. Then I stopped and turned. The little spheres were handy things. Until armed, they gave off little in the way of magical emanations. When armed, they could produce a number of effects. I settled for flash and smoke. On a clear day, the flash was wasted, but the smoke, with a touch of magically induced panic, set the horses wild. The touch of panic also caused it to take a moment or so longer for the riders to calm themselves, let alone get a hold of the horse of their mounts. The smoke also obscured the trail, though with the breeze blowing, it wouldn't last. I liked it for the trees. We found ourselves a hiding place before the riders could approach the trees. For some reason, they refused to approach the wood, but sat watching for a bit. Then the commander, a sergeant it seemed, sent a rider back along the trail. The fact they wouldn't come into the forest seemed a clear indication that there was something dangerous in here, more dangerous than 2 people on foot. As for us, when it was clear they weren't coming in after us, we started moving along the way. We don't have much alternative, I said. There may be something else in these woods, but either we wait until they summon enough help to be willing to dare whatever's in here, or we keep going. And perhaps meet up with it ourselves, she smiled. No, you're right. We should keep going. Shortly after, I began to notice that the wood was very quiet, and it wasn't anything sudden. It was as if We'd frighten the wildlife into silence. It wasn't anything as sudden as if we'd frighten the wildlife into silence either. There were few, if any, sounds of far off birds or chattering squirrels in the distance. Something's wrong here, Callie said. Something's very wrong here, I agreed. Our choices, though, were to face the possibility of meeting something in the forest or go back and face the certainty of being taken by the soldiers. I could see in my mind as two small mice scuttling from trunk to tree trunk, sniffing danger in the air, always moving, always looking for a way to escape the dire danger that watched. Suddenly, it came stepping between the trees. At first, I thought it was a bear, but no bear moved with such grace on its hind legs. No, it was no bear, nor wolf, nor any such ordinary thing. It was a good foot and a half taller than I, covered with brown fur, and a face that looked like a bear's, though with a shorter snout. Its arms were long, and it had real hands, not paws, but the fingers were tipped with the long, sharp claws, and it smelt of death and carrion. I felt the beginnings of panic. Then I threw myself into the dance, concentrating on what was, not feelings. My sword came out. It laughed. There was no speech, none of those sneering declamations of so beloved of the fantasies in novels or on stage. Just a laugh as it sprang. I met it with the sword. It did not seem to recognize the sword as a weapon, for it ignored the thrust until the blade was buried half a hand deep within its hairy chest. It made a sound that seemed vaguely like a question, then pulled itself back off the blade. It was bleeding, but apparently not much worse for the wound. If such a deep wound did not concern it, though. I fought off a rising panic and wondered if it was projecting fear. My training in the dance came to the fore, and there was nothing else, only me and the enemy. He would attack, and I would move in response. My body was aware of the poor footing of the forest floor, lumps, hollows, roots, low bushes. It was also aware of the creature in front of me, not aware in terms of size or ferocity, but as a foe to be defeated. It moved, swatting at my sword. I didn't dare let it grip me with those arms, those claws, or I was done. No, I wasn't specifically thinking this. This was one of those things which, aided by the dance, my body knew. I stepped to my right as the creature reached where I had been. I turned and cut it across the back. It whirled, dreadfully fast, and lunged again. I dodged right again and managed a small cut on its shoulder. Again it was whirling and lunging. I dodged, this time to the left, and was justified when when its lunge suddenly took it in the direction I'd have been if I'd gone right. I managed to quick in and out, thrust to the lower back before it recovered. For all the wounds, it recovered terribly quickly. It whirled and came at me again, and I stepped back. The forward step allowed me to get another thrust in, after which I stepped sideways again. A wild backward swing of its hand caught me glancingly across the chest, and I staggered to keep my balance. In that brief moment of off balance, it was almost on me. It knocked aside the sword I attempted to interpose, then reached to rend me with its claws. Suddenly, fell aside. I took 2 steps to regain my balance. As I regained my balance, I saw a log strike the thing down like a club, but with no hands holding it. The massive cudgel struck again and again until the beast ceased to move. Then the log fell across his chest and remained there. Jerry, are you hurt badly? I looked down at myself. There were scratches and gashes all across my chest and arms. They were going to start hurting soon. Not badly, thanks to you. I think we ought to stop and take a look at some of these cuts. Do you have any idea what that beast was? Yes, I believe I do. And it means we're behind time. She began pulling off the remnants of my shirt. I think it was a Meshtiquans, a monster known to the Madahako people of the new continent. Valdrif has made a minor specialties of studies of the new continent. And if Prince Konvak has accepted Valdrif sufficiently enough to set him up as guard set him let him set up a guardian. Oh my goodness. And then the prince is well on the way to accepting the secret that Valdrif stole. That means we'll have to get there quickly. She continued, using the remnant of my shirt for bandages. The mere fact of the Meshtik ones being aroused will come to Valdrif's attention. The magic I used to bring it down won't go unnoticed either. So they'll know we're coming, and they'll know approximately where we are. I may be able to hide us from them for a bit, but I make no promises. And we'll have to burn the Meshtik ones. Only burning it can ensure it's dead, from what I recall. I really don't know much about the new continent. She used magic to clean the wounds, a little magic capsule that she broke over my chest. It caused a tingling up and down my body, as well as a blaze of pain across the wounds. Sorry, I don't know what kind of infection might be on those things' claws. We, mostly she set fire to the log across the Mystic ones. We stacked more branches on it to keep the fire going, then stood back to watch the blaze. I hope this is enough, she said. As I said, I don't know much about the new continent. Neither do I. Are we likely to meet more of them, do you think? She shrugged. I don't know. It seems to me that one of them holds a large territory all by itself, and they very rarely gather together. That's just a feeling of what I seem to remember. So we'd best be on our way. Yes. And I'd best set up a few protections. Just warning words so that we won't be taken by surprise. It'll only take a moment. So we went from there, moving a little less cautiously and a little faster. After all, as Callie had pointed out, we just told him where we were. Staying in that place, or near to it, was not a good idea, even if we left more readable tracks. When we came out of the wood, there was a troop of dragoons waiting for us. It wasn't as bad as it sounds. They weren't on the same path as we were, but they were on a hillock where they could overlook a lot of territory, including where we were. One kept watch, one went to report in, and the rest came in our direction. Callie flipped a little sphere into the air over us and said a word. There was a light tickle feeling all over me, for some reason, a twinge in my wounds. Invisibility, she said. They can't see us until it wears off. They'll be able to follow our tracks, though, and we can't move very fast, or we'll outrun the spell. Still, it might give us a chance to throw them off. Being forced to move slowly gave us a chance to take more trouble hiding our tracks. Still, it was likely that one or more of the dragoons had some hunting skills, so we couldn't count on losing them altogether. Worse was yet to come. When we stopped for the evening, Callie said, "Someone's been pushing at my wards all afternoon, most of the afternoon. They'll probably be able to work their way through before too long. We just stand still. I could hold them off indefinitely, but there's no point to that. We can't move much faster. The dragoons are crowding us as it is." "I know. I'll have to I have a possible means of getting inside Welkrin, but it's risky. Even more risky than running from the dragoons in a way. But it might be done if you have steady nerves and a good sense of balance." "You make it sound like wire walking." "It's similar, perhaps even more than you imagine. We'll go out of this world and into another world, but not a world like this. It's chaos, where anything can be and likely is. But my spell will lay out on a trail like a silver thread towards our goal. There may be things that try to frighten or entice us to step off the track. Stay on it, whatever happens. I might well not be able to find you again if you step off." I was recalling that little package I'd seen back in the warehouse in Raylan. Perhaps this was one time when going through chaos might be less dangerous than the alternative. Won't the prince's magicians be able to find how you went? And if they find out how, might they predict where? What I'm planning is to put so much force into my shields that when the prince's wizards fully break down the shields, the massive wild magic produced by that will mask what we've done. Even so, there's no way of predicting where they'll come out. As far as they know, we may well have fled back to Kralstordran. Kralstorden. Even I won't know exactly where in Welkrin I'm going to arrive until the instant I arrive there. So, depending on where we arrive, we're going to have to do some quick moving when we get there. Of course. I had a picture in my mind of us arriving in some locked dungeon and me having to break out of there with the soldiers and wizards and all rushing downstairs and corridors to stop us. Callie's spell apparently took some time. First, she sat on the ground, cross-legged, and began to hum. The hum grew louder and became a chant, or perhaps it shaded into a chant as it became louder. The chant continued to grow in a rising, falling rhythm that I could almost follow, but not quite. It continued on until I was almost sure that the dragoons must be able to hear it. I kept myself alert in case they had the courage to approach a wizard obviously in the middle of casting a spell. Part of my mind said they wouldn't, even when the least sensitive among them must recognize the powerful magic that was being called. But in another part of my mind, old Holton was muttering something about the thing you knew someone wouldn't do was quite often the thing they actually did. I didn't notice the hole until it was about the size of my palm of my hand, growing visibly. I suspected it probably started out as a mere pinhole, hidden in the beginning dimness of the approaching night. Now, it was visible as a darker darkness in the midst of the night. It continued to grow. Nothing but darkness could be seen in it, and perhaps there was nothing to see. Eventually, the hole was the size of my torso. It was no longer mere blackness, but something seemed to be moving within it. It looked like a rolling of dark storm clouds with occasional flashes of color. Suddenly, she stopped. I would make it bigger, but there's little point. Later on, I might need the power I'd be expending. I also think it'd be a good idea if we didn't take absolutely everything. Bits of half recognizable debris might make them feel more confident that they got us. I nodded. I've been thinking along the same lines myself. I took my sword, my pistol, and tossed out several things from my backpack, including most of the food. Weapons will be no good to us along the way, she said. In fact, having them in hand could conceivably be dangerous. Very well, she was a magician. She should know what she was doing. I sheathed the sword and put the pistol back in my belt. You go first. The way is marked. There's no mistaking it. Don't fall off the track for any reason. Okay, and that is chapter 9. So that is halfway. And there are similarities to other stories. A couple of stories. But I'll talk about that probably next week because I'll do wrap ups after I'm done going through all these. Because I'm going to try and finish what I can. We'll see how far I get. Because tomorrow, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how far I get. It might be a long one on Friday, is all I'm saying. Okay. Okay. And now, on to chapter 10. I stepped through the hole, ducking my head to get through. There was a large silver spot inside, and leading off into the darkness from the spot was a long, straight silver line. It was about the width of a large rope, but flat, a long silver ribbon marking our road. Everywhere around, above, below, and on both sides was the rolling color shot darkness. Keep going. Callie had to shout to be heard over the steady thrumming, whining noise that rose and fell around us. I hadn't realized until then I'd been standing still, trying to make sense of what was around me. There was no making sense of it, of course. This was chaos. And the only clear and logical thing in it was the silver path. I stepped forward. Worse was to come. There seemed to be no reliable sense of up or down. I was walking a silver line on the floor, though sometimes it was on the ceiling, sometimes on a wall. I swallowed my nausea and went on. Dim figures haunted the darkness, not quite visible, but still somehow threatening. We kept on moving. A dark, half-seen reptilian shape drifted overhead, carried by massive bat wings. Bodiless faces swooped in, some with mouths leering, some screaming, some gibbering. We carried on. A golden tree loomed out of the gloom beside the path. I found my eyes drawn to it as we approached. It was beautiful, too beautiful for mere words to describe. A whispering began in my mind that this was the answer, the solution to any problem. There's no need to go further. Just go to the tree, and all would be well. Just one step away. All other questions receded from my mind. Why go further? This was all that was necessary. Something struck my back. Don't step off the track. I pulled my mind back. Yes, the tree was still beautiful. Yes, it still sang delicious promises in my mind. But now I was aware. I could withstand it. All the way past, I held to my purpose, putting one foot in front of the other on that silver line. A little child wept by the path. His father had been slain. Her mother had been slain. Her Her father had been slain, her mother had been taken prisoner by an evil lord. She needed someone heroic to kill the lord and rescue her mother. No, no one had told me. All this came into my mind in an instant. And it came with the knowledge that if I passed by, the child would, without doing anything to help her, the fact that would it came with it came a knowledge that if I passed the child by without doing anything to help her, that fact would haunt me all my life. Apparently, it was too soon after the golden tree. I was able to question all these feelings and reject them. It was not always something happening either. Mostly, we struggled against vertigo, following the silver line through the roiling blackness. Hairy, stooped figures hobbled and capered across the silver path, threatening us, snarling with vicious-looking, om- ominous teeth. They surrounded us, shouting and brandishing clenched fists. My hand went to my sword. "Ignore them!" Callie shouted. "They can't hurt us, but trying to fight them could be fatal." Against my better judgment, I let go of my sword hilt and went on. The best figures continued to caper around us, threatening but never coming close enough to do more than feign attack. We left them behind as well. Or was behind anything more than subjective judgment in this place? On we went through the darkness. The silver line went over a small stone bridge. In the middle of the bridge was a large man-like figure, stooped, knotted with muscle, a head of wild black hair, and slightly less hair on his body and limbs. He held a metal-bound staff, thick as my waist. But I didn't doubt that he'd be able to wield it as lightly as any shepherd lad at a county fair quarterstaff competition. No one could cross that bridge without paying the tithe. "Illusion!" Callie called. "Look carefully at the path." In fact, the path seemed to lead over the bridge and was an offshoot of the path we were on, slightly off the real path, which went just beside the stone bridge, where no river flowed. Ignoring the ogre on the bridge, I walked on. My mind tried to tell me that the real path went across the bridge, but I forced myself to believe Callie. The silver path ended. Just ahead was a large silver spot, and above it, a vertical hole showed in the blackness, distinguishable only from the surroundings by the gray tinge to it. That's it? That's it. I stopped and stepped through. The grayness was the inside of a darkened room, and my eyes grew rapidly accustomed to the light. I realized it was a bedroom, and worse, an occupied one. Just as I realized that, the person in bed rolled on the opposite side, putting the bed between myself and him. There seemed to be no means of summoning servants, but a shout would be heard for quite a distance. There was a flick of light beside me, and just as I was about to shout to Callie to put out the light, when she said, "Jerry, it's Prince Valad." I wouldn't have recognized him. I'd never seen him, but the public gossip always described him as slender with fine features. This was a small, described him as a small, sturdily built young man, heavily muscled, with a slightly fleshy face. He held a candlestick in his hand, ready to use it as a weapon. He gave a slight mocking bow. At your service, madame. I've not thought to face so fair an assassin. So my dear father has given me up for dead, has he? And so my poor dear brother sees no reason to keep me alive any longer? Prince Convict had been holding the king's army at bay with an unspoken threat to the other heir on, to, to the only other heir on the throne. The king couldn't allow such a threat to hold him back indefinitely. We aren't assassins, Prince Bellad, Callie said. We've come to deal with the magician Valdrif. Ah, my brother's world smasher? Have you indeed? And the path to this wizard just happened to be through my bedchamber? Of course, if it happened to in some novel or stage play, I would have thought it too hideous a coincidence myself. I am many things, lady, but not so big a fool as that. And since my brother will not stop at fratricide, no matter how he tries to put the thing on someone else by using someone else's hands, come on then. I do not delude myself that I can seriously defend myself with this. He hefted the candlestick. But at least I will not allow you to stick me like a hog at the butcher's. Callie, I said, go past me to the door. Prince Vlad, though you don't believe us, we are not assassins. Stay where you are and don't interfere with us. The door will be locked, Jerry. Undoubtedly. I'll deal with that too. Continuing to watch the prince, I backed toward the door. Highness, I know you won't believe us, and in your place, I'd find it difficult to credit as well. We don't have any ill intentions toward you. We're here to prevent the wizard Valdor from providing your brother with a weapon of terrible strength. I prefer not to harm you, but keeping you from harm is not our prime consideration. Callie, keep watch. If he moves from where he is before I've got the door open, tell me. The lock was one of the simpler ones, of course. Simple infers that you've learned various tricks about locks, which I had. The prince apparently made no move while I dealt with the lock. I turned to him just before I pulled the door open. Highness, I'm going to leave this door unlocked. There's going to be a lot of commotion going on shortly. I'd suggest you take some clothing and slip into another room. When the confusion starts, you might be able to make some use of it to escape. I didn't bother to wait to see if he followed my suggestion, as I said. His welfare was not my prime interest. Callie and I hurried down the hallway to the stairs, where we heard a clatter of boots. Well, the wizards would have discovered our entry immediately, and they'd likely have had a party of men standing by all times for just such a likelihood. Callie grabbed my arm. Wait! She snapped up a small marble sphere ahead of us, speaking the arming word. When the first soldier came down the stairs, lantern in hand, the globe gave a soft pop. A light mist spread across the floor, then disappeared. As the soldier stepped toward us, his feet flew out from under him. He smacked onto the floor. The lantern flew up in an arc in the air and behind the downed man, nearly catching the second man in the face. As he batted it away, the second man said something derogatory to the first, managed to keep his feet for at least a few seconds, then went down beside the first. The spell contained a powerful sleep spell, which hovered near the floor, so once anyone went down, they wouldn't be up until the spell wore off. The lantern, which somehow managed to land upright, can cast a flickering orange light on the scene. cast a flickering orange light on the scene. The push of men on the stair sent all but the last four out, where they too skidded and slipped and finally fell to the floor. The spell wouldn't make allowances for who stepped on the floor, of course. It would be just as slippery for me as any of the prince's men. I made a jump and landed on a prone body, made another jump and landed on an unconscious soldier, and had my sword into one of the remaining four before he could recover from the surprise sufficiently to do more than lift his sword. My looting was not the best. Bodies tend to give and roll, but I'd practiced on all sorts of terrain. One of my main concerns was that these men would be among the prince's best. I'd gotten one of them by surprise, but the others weren't going to be so easy. I stepped back from a thrust and stumbled as my foot slipped off a torso. The next thrust, with his triumphant shout, was an all-out effort. My stumble, however, was one of those nasty tricks old Holton had drilled into me. I batted the sword aside and thrust the man through the throat. The next two were now out on the human carpet. However, they had not had quite enough training, and besides, there'd be a bit of that glider I'm stepping on going through in their minds. The one that went down quickly, the last one, a little better and a little luckier, managed to stay up through several passes before I thrust him through the chest. I jumped the stairs and looked back at Callie, unhesitatingly. She jumped from man to man until she reached me. As I scrambled up the stairs, I asked, "Do you have any idea how much time we have before the next lots come along? Or more importantly, do you have any idea which way they go to?" "Left at the top of the stairs, two doors along." Of course, in the manner of their worst stage fantasies, at the top of the stairs and three steps down the corridor was a wizard. He was dressed pretty much normally, even stylishly, in a tight fawn trousers and black coat. He was carrying a staff, though, a large oaken one, with some strange writing carved in a spiral around it. Having dealt with Alfcron, I wasn't about to make a mistake about penchant for affectation with lack of substance. He pointed the staff at me, and my hair began to stand on end, and my skin began to prickle. Callie spoke a word, and my skin and hair settled down. And I'm "Ha!" he said, like almost a fantasy wizard about to declaim on his great power and might, and the fact that we were doomed. This was not a fantasy. He moved his hand on the staff and spoke a word of his own. Lighting flashed towards Callie. Pardon me. The lightning rebounded against a wall, leaving a double palmed width of smoldering char. The door that was not our objective opened, and something pale went leaping down the hallway away from us. Someone in what seemed to be a white nightshirt. Callie spoke a word, and fire surrounded the wizard, then died down, leaving him standing there unharmed. A violet beam flowed toward Callie. Then, just before it reached her, it spattered harmlessly out of the way in a flare of yellow and green and blue. I fired my pistol at him, more to be doing something than for any hope of success. The ball hit his shield, fell to the floor, and rolled away. It may have caught his attention, even momentarily, for the next thing to happen was a sudden thrumming, not so much a sound as a feeling in the air, and the magician seemed to waver. Then he suddenly fell apart where he was, like a shattered sculpture. No blood was in evidence, only shattered slivers of what had been a man, clothing, shoes, staff, and all. I'd only realized I'd been staring when Callie said, "Come on, Jerry." Not good work, Jerry. It's not as though you haven't seen magic before. Valdorf left the room while I was dealing with the magician. My regard for Callie, always high, went higher. In the midst of a life and death magical fight, she still had enough awareness of her surroundings to notice the magician fleeing his room. He went down the hall, I said, starting that way myself. Just a minute. We will chase him from here to there and all around the barn and still not find him. She approached the door to his room and stopped. She made a gesture and the door swung open. She smiled at me. He might just have left a trap for the first fools to touch the door. So now, you wait here and keep watch. I stayed in the hallway, watching for anyone or anything coming, occasionally glancing in to see what she was doing. She took a small gray wand from her pack and set it on the bed. She spoke a few words and waited. Shortly, one end of the wand began to glow. She picked it up again. This will keep us going in the right direction. We hurried up along the hallway. The next incident was more out of a farce than a drama. We went around the next corner of the hallway to collide with three swordsmen, rushing equally heedlessly in our direction. My fault, of course. I've been too busy watching the glow of the wand to be using my oh so highly trained senses to listen for the scuff of booted feet on the carpeted floor. Callie bounded back. Carpeted? Callie bounded back to sit on the floor in an undignified sprawl. The man who'd hit her went stumbling on by, losing his sword and sprawling face down. The one I hit staggered against the wall, losing his balance, teetering, and righting himself. The third one stumbled over Callie, but caught his balance, and after running 3 steps down the hallway, stopped and turned. I made up for my first carelessness by letting myself fall and roll in a backward somersault to my feet. The fellow I'd collided with was pulling his sword back into some sort of guard position when I struck fast, cutting at his knee. It wasn't a serious wound, though it would begin to tell in a long fight. I didn't have time for a long fight. He jumped back, getting himself properly ready now. I heard the fellow who had stumbled over Callie and stayed upright coming behind me. I whirled to face him, parrying his thrust and almost impaling him before he could stop his rush. Even the poor light, I realized, was fighting Prince Konvuk himself. The sturdy build, the somewhat fleshy face, the hair, nearly as pale as Alfron's, told the tale. He was also a skilled fencer, though his training had been in the standard fencing hall fashion, using blades, but none of the nasty little tricks I was capable of, such as pulling the empty pistol from my sash, throwing it left-handed at his face, following that with a thrust as he warded off the missile. His athletic ability saved him there, where I managed to knock the pistol out of the air. I had to pull up my thrust because the man I'd wounded was coming back up behind me. He was in too big a rush, determined to protect the prince, no doubt. I had knocked his thrust aside and thrust myself. He staggered back against the wall and slid down, leaving a bloody smear on it. I had no time to admire my handiwork. I whirled to find the prince advancing, a little more carefully, and the fellow who'd fallen over Callie was now on his feet, coming my way as well. The prince was being more cautious now. I could almost hear old Holton muttering about how I'd messed it up. Fine, what was I going to do now? What I did was something definitely not recommended. I did a high kick at the prince's sword, grazing it just as he pulled it aside. I set the kicking foot down well forward to give impetus to my thrust. This one took him right in the right shoulder, and he staggered back. The sword dropped from his hand. The last man, his duty clear to him, grabbed the prince, supporting him with his left shoulder, while holding his sword up in guard. His eyes on me, he began retreating down the hallway in the direction from which Callie and I had come. Fine as the idea Fine as the idea seemed to come, fine as the idea seemed be to some, we were not here to kill Prince Convict. Callie was on her feet, leaning against the wall. The prince and one man got away, Callie. They're headed down the hallway. We want Valdrith. Yes, she looked at the wand. This way. A slightly useless statement. We knew he'd gone around the corner and not come back. But given my personal lack of performance, colliding with people, for the God's sake, who was I to pass commands? We now moved carefully. There were altogether too many shadowy corners and nooks for someone to be lurking in. Callie moved the wand from side to side, reading the shades of variations of color. Finally, she pointed up at a door. He's behind that. Wait, what? He's behind that, she muttered. And might he have any sorts of spells, Freddie? She shrugged. Truth is, he's mostly an academic. That means he can tell you what book the spell's in, probably what page it's on, and probably the same for that spell's variant forms. Whether or not he actually knows that spell to the point of being able to use it is another matter. And only a blazing fool would try to cast a spell he wasn't fully sure of. I smiled slightly. All of which means what? She smiled back at me. I'm not strictly an academic. I can name lots of pages and books myself, but 7 out of 10 cases at least. But in 7 out of 10 cases at least, I know the spell as well. Now, just a moment. She moved her hand slightly, just a finger breadth away from the door handle and lock plate, resulting in a light mauve glow. He's inside. The door's not locked, and there are apparently no obvious traps. Therefore, she pushed the door open. It was a big room, a workroom, set up partly for alchemical works. At the far end, a man was flipping through a book by the dim light of a candle. What I had taken for a nightshirt was actually a loose white shirt worn with a pair of very light buff-colored trousers. Buff? What? Yeah, there's been a lot of me going, what is this? He looked up at us and without hesitation hurled a flask of something at us. Callie made a gesture, and the flask, contents and all, veered off to smash against a wall. She cast a spell, which started the thrumming sound, but the thrumming became grinding, then died away. A silvery zigzag drew itself across the floor towards Callie. Suddenly, about a hand's breadth from her feet, the zigzagging shivered off into a spider web of hair-thin silver lines, then stopped. Callie's next spell went without me noticing, though I thought I saw a slight yellow shimmer in the air, which faded to nothing. I wondered whether she'd been a trifle overconfident in stigmatizing him as a mere academic. Of course, for my part, I ought to have taken a moment after the scuffle with the prince to recover and reload my pistol. He glanced in my direction and spoke a spell. The first thing I felt was a flare of pain where the Meshtikwans had clawed me. Then something began to crush me. I felt my ribs creaking. I began to lose consciousness. I tried to cast myself into the state of healing. The last thing I saw was a button at the waist of Balder's shirt beginning to flare into fire. Everything disappeared into blackness. Wow. Guess what? That's where I'm stopping tonight. Okay, so it picks up. It gets better. Probably still do some rewriting, but yeah, yeah, okay. I want to see where it goes because I still have questions and I still need to make sure they're answered. Again, YouTube, I'm super sorry that it cut out halfway through. I'm hoping you're able to get the two of them together. If not, regardless, no matter what, I'll put up the full one from Twitch. I'll upload to you guys. Just give me a little bit because it may not go up to. I don't know when it'll go up, but it'll be soon, very soon. I'll try and do that tonight / tomorrow morning. So, thank you, everyone. I know it's been a long one tonight, but I want to get through these chapters, and yeah. So tomorrow night will probably be another 3-chapter night. And then Friday is going to be an extra long one. Because that'll be, well, you know what I might just do? I'm probably going to break it up. I'll do 3 chapters on Friday. And then 2 chapters on Monday. And finish it up from there. That's probably the best way to go. So, unless they're shorter chapters, in which case I can't be held accountable for my actions. But anyway, it's been a long night, and I have some write-ups to do now. So, because I'm trying to write my takeaways from each of the chapters. So I'm going to be doing that. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you all again tomorrow. So thank you and have a good night.